is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This is episode number 413. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me, well, in this case, right across the table here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, hi.
Yellow.
We've been hanging out today.
Yeah. We normally
not in our normal way.
We normally record this before day one of the Pro Tour.
That's right.
Unfortunately, this particular time I actually had to push the episode by a day because we didn't have a deck. Not that we didn't know what we were going to play, but we hadn't nailed down the last bunch of slots, and
that's very valuable time.
Yeah, that really is.
Yeah.
But we did. We ended up playing Teamer with Black for those who care about that, and off to a good start at this Pro Tour. But it's after day one. I am 5-3 in the Pro Tour.
Nice.
But I 3-0 draft, which is, I assume, what all the listeners care about.
That's a sound of a high five right there.
Or some amount of flesh slapping. But
I have to I have to ask you, you feeling good to be back?
Yeah, so...
Because it was good to see you back in the feature match area, I can't lie.
My goal for this tournament was to play well. It wasn't to have a particular finish. Obviously, I would love the top 8, and everyone always does.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to feel like I was playing bad, win or lose. I mostly accomplished it. I felt pretty dialed in, but I did punt around really badly. I failed to make a Whirler Virtuoso token with 3 energy. Like I bin my Whirler too quickly. And that stings, because that's just the kind of mistake I don't like making. And I tend not to. I am usually pretty good at technical play and stuff like that. But in terms of my overall strategic lines of play, I'm very happy. I actually felt like I was not only playing around what my opponents had, I was leading them down lines of play and making them do what I wanted, which is the kind of thing that only happens when you're really
that's
you're
dialed in play,
yeah.
For sure. Also, Team ChannelFireball.
Yeah, we
not bad.
I have the worst record on our team. I'm 5-3, and the rest of my team is 7-1, 7-1, 7-1, 6-2, 6-2, 5-3. So
that is unreal. What a great start for that. And of course, this is an important one. This is the first Pro Tour of the new teams.
Yeah, and one of the things that we'll get to in the show that I'm really happy about is, now that I'm actually testing again, I actually have a lot more to talk about when it comes to limited. Maybe this format doesn't have quite as much as we went normally because it's a little older in its rotation than normal. But I'm excited to be back in the testing mode and jamming limited. When I was doing coverage, it wasn't the same. It wasn't the same in terms of prep.
Not.
I knew we need to know what we're talking about, but it's not the same as being in the testing house and jamming a ton of drafts and watching everyone draft and just having a limited meeting and discussing things.
Exactly. Speaking of ChannelFireball, not only the team, but the website, they're, of course, the place to go for everything you need. I took a quick look at the website today. Ton of limited content on there still. If you're having a hard time with the format, there's a couple of different What's the Pick articles up, one from Reed Duke, one from Mike Sigrist, and that'll help you. There's also one from Huey Jensen as well. These are the type of things that you can kind of ride along with the pro and get some insight into their thought process to help guide you as well. And then if you want to watch draft videos, I have one up there. I'm not a pro Magic player, but, I think about this stuff a lot and I try to talk through my decisions. Yeah,
and I will tell you that, no jokes, when we're testing, we look at the what's the picks from people on other teams. We look to see what Reed and Huey say because it is valuable information.
And, speaking of, if you want to watch a full-on pro, there's Reed Duke has a Ixalan draft up right now. Pat Cox does as well. So, you're going to find that kind of stuff on ChannelFireball. While you're there, you can pick up everything you need Magic related. It's kind of a one-stop shop if you need things for singles, sealed product, that kind of stuff. You're going to find it as well as supplies. Highly recommend ChannelFireball.com. You can also help the show out directly via the Patreon. It's patreon.com/limited resources. Super easy to get set up. There's a short video there that tells you how to do it and how it works. And very straightforward. And you can stop anytime. There's no contractual thing. You can set any limits that you need for your budget. And it all works out happy. There's no Patreon question of the week, Louise, because we're going to answer a bunch of them. And that leads us to our Cracker Pack, which Louise has gotten a little bit ahead of. Hey, we didn't say who this was from. This one came from Danica, our listener. Thank you, Danica, for the pack. It was nice to meet you at the Grand Prix as well. Let's see what all
right, we're starting with Queen's Commission. 2 and a white, make 2/1 vampire tokens. Not a card you'll play. In fact, I didn't play it today, but not a card you're going to first pick.
No, definitely not.
Next up is Blightkeeper. 1 block for a 1/1 flyer. Also a card you'll play. I believe this will make your main deck about 70% of the time.
We saw this taken over Contract Killing today.
That I don't agree with.
From a player who 3-0'd and has like a 76% match win percentage on the Pro Tour in Limited.
Well,
from Japan.
like I said, that I don't agree with.
Me too.
But
I couldn't believe it.
Blightkeeper's quite playable. Not a first pick. I'm still not first picking Blightkeeper.
Okay.
Fathom Fleet Firebrand. 1 in a red, 2/2 fire breathing. This is not only in the front running. It's actually a card. I have to admit, I'm happy to first pick.
Yes, really. You actually just feel good about that.
Like, it's not above average. It's not like,
okay,
wow, I really did it. I took like a Territorial Hammer Skull. Fathom Fleet Firebrand, I think, is the best red common.
Okay. That's saying a lot.
Yeah, it's better than Fire Cannon.
There's 2 red
Blast.
removal spells, yeah.
I know. It's crazy. Legion Conquistador, 2 and a white for a 2/2 that gets more copies.
That card's better than it looked, too.
Also playable.
Yeah, I have been playing
We've had to
those
readjust
more
our standards, as we say.
That is it, right? Like, that's it. We've had to readjust
context.
What's playable. Yeah, exactly.
In the speed of the format. But we're not taking Legion Conquistador over Fathom Fleet Firebrand. Next up, Shipwreck Looter, 1 in a blue, 2/1 raid.
That one I don't like that much. I really just haven't
I think you always play it. So, it's a 2-drop, yeah, I know. But we're not taking it over Firebrand.
Right.
Communal Dinosaur is also not taking it over Firebrand. Dive Down.
That one's with a bullet.
Also, that has gone up way a ton.
Way up, yeah.
Worse than Firebrand, but I actually think it might be the pick outside of that.
Yeah, I think so too. The things that made that good are the fact that the removal tends to be clunky, that there are spells that let you kind of build up one creature.
Auras are great.
Yeah, and you occasionally just get good value as a combat trick, which you don't normally.
I'd say more than half the time that's what happens is you play a 2-drop, they play a 2-drop, you attack, use Dive Down when they block, play another 2-drop.
Yes.
If you both have good draws. Basically, when both players have good draws, whoever draws more Vampire Zeals and Dive Downs is going to win, because they get to double spell.
Skullduggery too.
Yep. Grazing Whiptail. Not as good as Firebrand.
No, but it's good.
But good. Might be better than Dive Down. Yeah. Demystify, clearly not in the running. Skymarch Bloodletter, also a good card. Above the rest of the cards, but the Firebrand, I still would take Firebrand.
I would take Skymarch Bloodletter.
I
know the 2 mana matters a lot, but I love that.
You get stuck on 3. It is very good. We got a better black card for you, though. Okay. Kitesail Freebooter. The 2 mana, 1/2 that gets to take a spell out of their hand.
Pretty good.
That is my current frontrunner.
See, I would take Fathom Fleet Firebrand over Kitesail Freebooter.
Would you take Kitesail Freebooter over Skymarch Bloodletter?
No.
Okay, because that would be a logical inconsistency. I would still take Freebooter. I think the fact that it's a disruptive element edges it out. Sleek Schooner, a 3 mana 4/3 crew 1 vehicle, not
super
anything special. Yeah. Bishop of the Bloodstained, worse than the common version. This is a 5 mana 3/3 that pings them for 1 for each vampire. So
very weird that the uncommon that's harder to cast is worse than the Anointed Deacon.
Fleet Swallower, a 7 mana 6/6 fish with no text. So at the end of the day, we have either Kitesail Freebooter, Fathom Fleet Firebrand, or Skymarch Bloodletter. I would just take the Kitesail Freebooter.
I would take the Skymarch Bloodletter.
All right.
Okay, so there's our Crack-a-Pack. So the show this week, we've got we're going to do a little bit of a twist. So normally this would be the show where we do our Pro Tour Insider that we talked about earlier. And this is where we get to pick the brain of Luis, who has the inside track on Pro Tour testing, either from being involved with it even while you were on coverage or actually on the team like you are now.
Yeah, and like I said, much more active now.
Yeah, and even more so now. The problem that we faced is Luis and I had a conversation a few days ago where we're like, look, this Pro Tour happened way later than normal, and we kind of know we've talked about this format on the show for a month and a half now.
Yeah.
And so the amount of stuff isn't quite a full show.
Yeah, it's way less meaty than it would be otherwise.
Right. So because normally it's still quite early in the format and we're really digging it. So what we've decided to do to adjust that is we're going to first do that. I'm going to talk to Luis and we're going to get what he found from his teammates and from that testing that maybe we haven't covered here, or anything relevant that he would find relevant for the listeners there. Then, since we don't anticipate that being a full show worth, I decided to throw it to our patrons to ask for questions. And what I decided to do was ask them to ask questions about testing in general at the Pro Tour level, primarily for limited, but the questions will go a little bit. But we're going to get to pick your brain about kind of the things that people always look and go, how do they do that? Like, do they keep the cards? Do they take pictures? Do they rate the draft? All these little details. And I'm going to throw a bunch of questions at you after that. So let's kick this thing off, though. Was there anything new? Did you learn anything? What kind of stuff were you guys covering at this slightly different format being much later?
So we did less limited prep for the exact same reason you mentioned. You
guys each had 50 drafts minimum under your belt.
Yeah, and a number of our teammates had played at Worlds. Like I guess it was because we tested alongside Team Ultra Pro, know? And so we had Paulo, Vitor, Sam Party, a couple of guys who played at Worlds, and so they'd already tested exact same format. So what we ended up doing was we did a lot of drafts. just in the in our testing group.
Like, and this is on Magic Online.
All on Magic Online, and we discussed like broad strokes, because what we didn't do, which we normally do like, and you've been here for this, Marshall, this limited meeting where we like lay out all the commons and uncommons of every color, and we
physically lay out the cards.
We have a whole set, and we rank them. And anytime there's a disagreement between multiple people, we try to like not necessarily come to agreement, but have each player explain what they think.
Yes.
And then
by the way, I love this meeting. I'm really bummed I missed it this time, but I had work.
You didn't actually.
Did I?
We didn't do it.
Oh.
And normally we do this. We didn't do that this time because not only do we all know where we rank these things, a month in we're not like that likely to change our opinion meaningfully. Like we did, if people had disagreements or if people had theories, we talked about those, but we didn't think it was going to be that useful because everyone understands the cards well enough that they can then determine where they fall, and you're not going to give people new information. Because a week into the format, you're like, well, I've had a lot of decks with Territory. Hammerskull, I actually think this card's really good, or Dive Down's been really overperforming. At this point now, everyone kind of knows how well those cards do, and whether you think Dive Down is the third best blue common or the fourth, it doesn't really matter. Right.
Yeah, where there's a decent chance that when the Pro Tour comes at the normal time, let's say you've been drafting a lot of red-white and you've kind of figured out the deck, but I just haven't had it yet. I can learn a lot from that. Right, you can tell me, look, Fathom Fleet, Firebrand, and Territory Hammerskull, these are the cards you want, where maybe I just don't have that much experience, and I'm gaining a big edge by listening to you there.
So a couple interesting things to come out of this, because again, we did a lot of discussions. We made sure we knew what was going on. One is that this format is fast. I mean, that's no surprise, right? We're talking about how important 2-drops are, how like Bishop Soldier, right? 2-mana, 2/2 lifelink might be the second best white common.
It's so good.
Might also be the best white common.
Yes.
I don't think it is. I think Hammerskull's still better, but there are decks.
But you're saying it could bump Pirates Interdiction.
I would have. Yeah, and I think Hammerskull, Bishop Soldier, and Interdiction are 1, 2, 3.
In that order.
And I don't think it's clear cut. Where you take them.
Bishop Soldier has gone.
I drafted Black White Vampires today. Great deck. It was really open, but I only had 3 2-drops. I would have taken Bishop Soldier over either of those cards later in the draft.
For curve reasons. Yeah. So it's close enough at least.
Right.
Then, yeah.
So clearly the format's fast. We're talking about how like Fathom Fleet Firebrand being the best 2-drop. But that said, when neither player stumbles, when they both have these cards to play, the games that can tend to go fairly long, and mana flow determines a lot of the games.
Definitely.
And what we kind of came to was like, there just aren't that many good mana sinks, ways to spend your mana. So cards like Pirate's Cutlass, that's why we think they're so valuable. It's part of the reason that cards like Ixalan's Keeper, Blight Keeper, Encampment Keeper, Fire Shrine Keeper, maybe not the Blue Keeper. I don't even know the name, like Shore or something Keeper.
Shore Keeper.
Maybe just Shore Keeper.
Yeah.
But Shore, whatever.
Dude, it draws cards.
Basically, the reason these cards overperform is that early they do a little bit of things like 1/1 Menace, 1/1 Flying. Yeah, these can ping in. But late, they actually give you something to do with your 8th land, which there just aren't any in this format. It's something that you lack, and maybe you don't realize it, especially since Explore, yes, it does help, but it also leads you to having more lands in play.
It does.
And so we talked a lot about how you can mitigate mana flood and just recognizing that like it's a reason to really want to play 16 lands. Like part of the reason that you get paid off for having a lower curve is having, getting to play fewer lands.
Yeah.
It's one of the few selling points of the Dinosaurs deck with green is that Commune with Dinosaurs is kind of like a cycling land.
Yes.
You get to play like 15 land with 2 Commune with Dinosaurs. And if you have, if you can afford 9 forests.
What about, so you're feeling the pressure of trying to find ways to mitigate flood, but also not play expensive cards just on their own.
You're getting pushed on both sides. Basically, if you don't play enough 2-drops, you're going to die to your opponent because they're going to play the 2-drops.
Yes.
And if you don't have any good high end or ways to sink your mana, sometimes you're both going to trade off cards, and you're going to draw 8 lands, and your opponent's going to draw 6, and you're just going to be down 2 spells. That's like your opponent drew 2 extra cards, and you're going to lose because of that. So, trying to figure out ways to gain an advantage was really big.
Okay, and were you guys like identifying specific cards like the ones that you mentioned, talking about like the Cutlass and stuff? Did these get brought up as discussion points?
They do.
Hey, this is a card you need to pay attention to.
They do, and the part of the value was identifying cards like the Keepers, which I think are a little bit underrated. Though, if people are slamming Blight Keeper over Contract Killing, maybe that's not the case.
Yeah.
But you can still get these Keepers pretty late on Magic Online, right? You draft, you see them. So identifying that, because remember that, and this is true whether you're playing on the Pro Tour, playing on Magic Online, playing at FNM, whatever, it's all context. The way you get edges and limited is identifying cards that other people undervalue and overvalue. and trying to figure out why they do those things. And
yeah, and that's what we try to focus on here. I mean, identifying the bombs ends up becoming quite easy.
The funny thing is it's kind of self-defeating because if we talk about it here, a lot of people listen to it, and that can have an impact on the ecosystem. It just means if you listen and other people don't, then you have an edge.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think that just knowing that you want to play a low curve 16 land deck, but also have a couple mana sinks was really important. And these are few and far between. Sometimes you just don't get them.
Yes.
But it just does mean that some expensive cards are a little better than you think, which is kind of weird because this format's so fast. But like cards like Shining Aerosaur, like we tend to main deck that card.
I like that card.
Cards like Windstrider, 5 mana, 3/3 Flying Flash. That card is actually good. Mm-hmm. Like it's not great, but it's
when
good.
people are prioritizing small 2-drops, and that's not that expensive. 5's fine. Like to me, the real question is like Deathless Agent.
Yeah, Deathless Agent.
Excuse me, Ancient.
Deathless Agent, yes. Queen's Agent, no.
Okay.
Yeah, Queen's Agent, the 6 mana, 3/3 Explorer lifelink, not super hot. Like you can play the card, but it's not great.
But 4/4 flyer ends the game quickly, and you don't mind having
March of the 6 mana 4/4 flyer. I think is quite good. Mm-hmm. Not quite good, just good. Mm-hmm. But March of the Drowned in a heavy pirate deck is pretty nice.
Nice little place to dump 6-7 mana, whatever it ends up being.
Right. Yeah. It's a way to get an advantage without costing yourself that much. Because if you have to on turn 4 replay one Siren Lookout with a March of the Drowned, you didn't lose out too much.
Not at all. Yeah.
But when you get back a 3-drop pirate and a 4-drop pirate in the middle of the game or late in the game, then you can bury your opponent in that.
Okay. So these are big talking points. What else?
Yeah. This is probably not super new news, but the combat tricks are all very good.
Yes.
Vampire Zero. Skullduggery is actually one card that we had a big debate about.
Really?
Ben Stark thinks that card is overrated. He doesn't even think it's in the top 5 black commons.
He didn't put it in the top 5 black commons. We did a thing at the Grand Prix, and Huey and I were both quite surprised to see it not make that list.
Right. So it was actually one of the things I got to watch, which was really interesting, was Ben Stark, noted limited mastermind, versus Martin Yuza, literally the draft master from last year, just got inducted into the Hall of Fame this weekend, arguing with each other about Skullduggery. And
God, I want to see that.
Yeah.
See, I miss out on this stuff.
And basically, some people are saying, at one point it was like Skullduggery is better than Contract Killing.
Yeah.
Where does Vanquish the Weak fall? And Ben has Contract Killing, Vanquish the Weak, and I don't know, Anointed Deacon.
Yes.
What are the 5 he had? A Queen's-based Soldier, probably.
I think so. Oh, yeah. What was it?
And
he had the 2 removal spells at the top spot, and then Deacon was on the top 5.
Yeah.
Skymarch
Bloodletter.
And no, it was Skymarch Bloodletter and Hoarder, Direfleet Hoarder.
Oh, Direfleet Hoarder. Yeah, right. That's actually why this came up.
Yeah.
Is because there's a pack with a Direfleet Hoarder and a Skullduggery, and whoever's doing the draft's I'm going to slam Skullduggery, and Ben's like, you shouldn't take that. Direfleet Hoarder is much better, and people are like, what? So we had these moments. The testing was fruitful. We had these moments where people would see this divergence in opinion and talk about it. And Ben's point was look, the card is good. Don't get Ben wrong. He's not saying don't play Skullduggery, and I'm certainly not saying that. I think the card is very good. Mm-hmm. But he says that often and maybe this is a little bit of Ben's pro player privilege seeping out. But he's if you think your opponent has it, you can play so it's just maybe a 1-for-1 at best, and sometimes not even that good. And it's yeah, that is true. And I had a Skullduggery played against me today, and it wasn't good. Actually, you might have seen it. It was on camera.
I did.
It made it so my opponent killed my 2/2.
Yeah, but that's you. You played around, you knew,
And so it's the sort of thing where I think in general, and also Ben's talking about playing against people on the Pro Tour.
Yes. I think that is the context for this, right?
And I think in general, I personally would still value Skullduggery highly. I would take it probably 4th in the common order.
Hold on a minute. Since when is a 1-for-1 for 1 mana not good?
Yeah, that's the part
killed your creature for a mana?
The problem I have here is it's hard for me to argue Ben's point because I don't believe it. I actually I can summarize it, but I'm with you. I'm with Martin. I'm with most people. Skullduggery is good, better than Direfleet Hoarder.
Definitely.
So
I also have it above Anointed Deacon as well, though.
That one's tricky. Early in the draft, yes. Later, Deacon's probably better if you're in Vampires. But
sure.
The 1-mana combat tricks I found to be very effective, and Skullduggery, part of the argument against it is that you can play around it, or it gets telegraphed, and also that you can make it, you take it out of your opponent's hand by making a block where they have to trade it for one of your creatures, but it's still a 1-mana combat trick.
And you get to free roll the people that are sloppy, and even at the Pro Tour, you'll get somebody who's just oh, I didn't see you had a treasure,
or even not sloppy. Even sometimes they have an X1 in play, and there's just no real way for them to effectively play around it. You're attacking them, you're ahead on life. They have to block one of your creatures, and you get a 2-for-1. I think Ben was pushing against our team saying, like, this card's really good, and his argument wasn't this card's unplayable. It was like, this card is less good.
Yes, and of course, that is one of the most valuable skills for these type of discussions is being able to speak in terms of, shades, right? It's not... You can't put words in the mouth and say, you can't say, Ben, well, you say skullduggery sucks. Like, that's not what Ben's saying.
Yeah. He got mad when someone said that.
I would too.
But, like I said, this goes back to exactly identifying the delta between where you value things where other people do.
Yes.
He was identifying, you guys think this card is, 1.2 times as good as it is. I think it's, I think you're overvaluing it.
Yes.
And I think there's edge to be gained by dialing that back a little bit.
And I mean, look, to Ben's point, by the way, what is the one thing you always think when your opponent has one black mana up? It's just skullduggery. Like, you can't not, because when we first played the format, it was like, this card looks pretty good, and you're like, oh my god.
It gets worse as the format goes on.
Yeah, and it does. He's right. I don't know how much that affects, how you should evaluate it, but it's something.
Yeah, and this is true. Again, I want to make sure that people know that we're not just talking about the Pro Tour here. Yep. People have played this format now.
Yes.
Like, you're not getting the free wins off it anymore. No. So... that was interesting. The other thing was kind of prioritizing archetypes. Like, most of us were very down on dinos. Like,
too slow?
Green dinos, specifically. Yeah, the deck is inconsistent, and when it comes together, still has the, ramp problem of, you drew ramp but no accelerators, and you drew accelerators but no... Or you drew no accelerators in your big things, or you drew accelerators and not your big things. And it is... not as good on average. So even sometimes it's right to draft it. Martin 3-0'd with Red Green Dinosaurs today, but he's not looking to do that.
Yeah.
Green White as well. And everyone agreed, this was actually unanimous among the team, Merfolk's the best deck.
So if it comes together, it's the best deck.
Right. And what that meant we did was we would bias towards that to take River Herald's Boon or One with the Wind, or random Merfolk higher than other things because we wanted to give ourselves outs to be in that deck.
I've been thinking about this a lot. So I use these as an example, and I realize that most of these are Merfolk cards, right? So you can be in green and get past Merfolk cards and not care, right? Yeah. And good ones like River Herald's Boon and Vine Shaper Mystic, and you're like, well, I'm green. Like Martin would have wanted those for his deck, right, for example. But So what you have to end up doing is committing early to those picks if you want to take a shot at Merfolk, because you just have to say, well, I'm going to take a second pick River Herald's Boon and just hope I get there. Here's a really interesting thing. There's not that many cards that put you into Merfolk early. There's Shapers of Nature, and people don't like to take that early because it's gold. There's a few rares that you might catch your eye. But you know what? Kapala doesn't. And Herald of Secret Streams, you rarely first pick it and just move in.
Shapers of Nature is the best Merfolk card.
It is, but again, how many times have you opened that plus plus like a Territorial Hammer Skull or a comparable monocolored card, and you're like, I'm just going to take the Hammer Skull. That happens all the time. You actually have to kind of dive into Merfolk and just hope it sticks.
But that's actually kind of an indictment of the format.
Agreed.
It's like you have to. In order to give yourself the best chance at having a good deck, I do think that even if it's not Merfolk, even if it's something else, a lot of the decks, you have to take a narrow card. And if you see a fifth pick Shaper Apprentice, you're like, okay, Merfolk's open. We got there. We found our lane. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the packs dry up and you're like, well, I have to abandon my first two picks.
Yes.
And
that's actually quite costly. There's been formats that are more forgiving.
Right. There's formats where you can dilly-dally. This is not one of those formats.
It's not.
And so we wanted Merfolk, but again, none of us were in the position of we're forcing anything. We're very far from it. In fact, I think it's a grievous mistake in Ixalan to try and force a deck.
I think it's horrendous.
I think in general it's not good, but there are times when it's excusable, especially if you read the metagame or you're like, I'm really good at drafting this deck and I don't know other things. Or you're cube drafting. But in Ixalan, it's a grievous mistake. Do not force decks. So we wanted Merfolk. We wanted Red-White just because Red-White's good. Vampire is also very, very good. And
Pirates?
I actually am pretty down on Pirates.
When you say Pirates, what colors do you think of? Red, black,
basically
blue, black?
The Grixis color combination of Pirates.
Any of them?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can draft these decks. Mm-hmm. They're fine.
Yeah.
Red-black is good when it comes together. Blue-black and blue-red I don't like as much as red-black. But what I don't like is that there's not a huge payoff for being Pirates.
There's not.
There really isn't.
No.
And even though Pirates Cutlass is a great card, it's a great card in Vamps too.
That's the problem. Other people are taking that card from you.
And you're not really getting super paid off for... if you're playing Red-White and you have 4 2-drop Pirates, then Cutlass is going to be great in your deck. And you're not a Pirates deck.
Definitely.
So even though sometimes it's correct to draft pirates because those are the colors that are open, we're still just talking about colors of Magic here. It's not a deck that really pays you off. The Nut Pirates deck is nothing close to the Nut Merfolk Vampires deck.
Right, and ask yourself that, like even as a listener, well, what are my big payoffs? Like the first card you think of is Pirate's Cutlass, right. And that's a temporary. That's kind of like haste.
Where do you go past that?
And then past that, it's like Raid. Like that's not pirate specific.
Heartless Brute, March of the Drowned.
Yeah.
Crickets?
Headstrong Brute. Yeah, no, yeah, there's just...
I keep getting that one wrong. I wasn't even on purpose the other episode.
Yeah.
I said it wrong 50 times.
Admiral Beckett Brass has been underwhelming and hard to cast.
Fell Flagship. Like, we're talking about rares here, too.
And those aren't even that great either.
No, so...
Yeah, I'm with you.
But above all, try to draft that's open. And that's true in most formats. Very, very, very true in this one. And prioritize, like, cheap combat tricks. I think Vampire Zeal is just Swords to Plowshares. Like, I had 2 in my deck today and it was great.
The card is excellent.
Continued to do for one. Underrated skill is passing when you have a combat trick. I got multiple people by just like, I attacked a 3-2 into their 2-2, passed.
And they're like, oh, you have Vampire Zeal double block, and you're like, cool trade.
Yeah. Or like attacked a 3-2 into a 2-2, passed, they dive down, then I cast Vampire Zeal, and it just did not work well for them. This format's not my favorite.
Yeah.
I think that the gameplay is okay. Like, there's a lot of games that are interesting. I actually had good games today. Like, they were intricate, and like, there's a lot of playing around what your opponent had, and that was cool. But there are still a high percentage of uninteractive games where just Mark of the Vampire, One with the Wind, just run away with it.
Yep.
And then the drafting portion, I think, is my least favorite drafting portion of almost every set I can remember because it's the combination of fairly linear decks not having an abundance of playables, so you have to just kind of lock in early and just hope it works, so you don't have the flexibility to jump around or adjust it. Like, one of the drafts that I got the most from was like way back at Pro Tour Gatewatch. This is like 5 years ago. Ben top-aided, and one of his drafts, he just starts like, this is the guild set where you're like all Boros or Simic or Dimir, or
Boros, as I remember.
Well, Ben goes like Boros card, and then takes a Simic card, pick 4, and just moves into Simic. And that's just not something you really find, or 5th pick, actually. And that's not something you really find in this set. You don't have the time to do that.
No. And it also has a tendency to produce weird situations where there's packs that you get multiple packs in a row with just nothing.
Right.
For anybody.
That's the thing, is like, I drafted Vampires today, and I was the only Vampires person at the table. I got Queen Base Soldier with 4 cards left, etc. I got a Maverick Vane 5th pick. But there were multiple packs that had no cards, black or white, that I wanted.
Yeah.
Just no cards.
But it just seems
and it wasn't that I wasn't in the right colors. I was exactly in the right colors.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't there.
You know that vibe that you get sometimes when you've been drafting for a long time, and you're like, okay, I feel like I'm in a good spot, but the packs just weren't good, right? That happens for 2 or 3 packs, but then all of a sudden, the next pick, you get some card that you would have first picked, and then the next pick's good, and you're like, okay, it was just a weird little setup. It feels like that's happening a lot. I heard, a very famous Magic pros, I said, hey, how'd your draft go? And he said, it didn't go very well. So what happened? He said, I got Ixalan. And I just knew exactly what that meant. Like, I've been in that spot.
I heard that multiple times today.
Yeah, I've seen that on camera when we covered it, and I've done it myself, where you feel like you tried and you did
frustrating
something reasonable.
Yeah. To do the thing you're supposed to do in draft, which is identify the open colors. That's the hardest thing to do in draft. It's the reason it's fun. But then get punished for it, not get rewarded for it.
Yeah. Feels bad, man.
That's just not not a recipe for success. Another interesting thing to come out is a deck we haven't really covered much, which is blue-white.
Yeah, I tried it out early, found it to be basically the sum of its parts. There was no synergies going on. The one card that came to mind was Favorable Winds, and I never made that work.
No, that's not really where I want to be at.
Me neither. So I just... Basically, each of them I could judge based on the cards. Like, you could say, oh, you got 2 Air Elementals and 2 Ixalan's Bindings. Like, okay, this deck ends up pretty good. You didn't. Okay, well, it's not as good.
So the one caveat to that is One with the Wind is actually really good in this deck because putting One with the Wind on either Bishop's Companion or Raptor, or Bishop Soldier or Raptor Companion, is a very good combo. So the white 2-drops combine really well with One with the Wind. And also Tempest Color, the 4-mana 2/3 that taps all creatures, goes up a lot in value. This is the blue aggressive deck that really wants it.
Yeah, I was not valuing One with the Wind when I did it because I figured most of my creatures have flying anyway.
One with the Wind is excellent in this deck.
Yeah, that was wrong. Yep.
And that's something that we drafted multiple times in testing. I remember watching, and then Pat Cox drafted it in the Pro Tour.
Okay.
So
good stuff. That was really interesting. Like, Yeah, there's more there than I would have thought, to be honest.
Oh, I also had practiced a skill in testing, which I ended up using the Pro Tour as open hostage taker. So,
did you take any hostages? No,
I actually never cast the card.
Didn't need it, huh?
Apparently not.
Oh, must be nice. Okay, let's get to these questions here, Luis, because, again, normally we'd have a bit more to talk about, but since we've covered Ixalan so much, I figured this would be a cool opportunity to open this up to a more broad set of topics. So here we go. I'm going to dive in. Bill says, hi, Marshall and Luis. I was wondering, how many boxes of Ixalan cards do you go through during testing, and what happens to all those cards after it's done?
0.
Yeah, it's 0 now, right?
Yep.
So that is a big change. When, like, take us back to 2010, in original ChannelFireball.
Not even 2010, like 2013, 2014.
Mm-hmm. This was you guys, like, there was a big push for you to get in the same room so that you could booster draft together.
Right. It used to be that the sets on Magic Online didn't come out till after the Pro Tour, or like maybe a couple days before. But they've kicked it up a notch in terms of speed. So even Ixalan aside, Ixalan obviously came out a month and a half ago. Even for like the last bunch of Pro Tours before that, it's on Magic Online 2 weeks ahead of time. We don't actually do live drafts anymore. I actually think they're less valuable. I actually noticed our limited preparation and win percentages go up when we started only drafting on Magic Online. Because, look, Magic Online single limb, competitive drafts, I think are just filled with good players.
They actually are.
And
they're tough.
Playing against 7 essentially nameless, faceless good players is actually more valuable than playing against 7 teammates, because when we start to like something, it spreads among ourselves and we're fighting over a thing that maybe not even be good, or you're like, wow, I'm getting passed to by Josh and he always drafts blue, so I know not to be in blue, and that already screws up the draft. That's already like biased. Yeah. So we do a lot better. And also it's underrated to someone fires up a draft and 3 or 4 people watch them and be like, oh, this is what's going on, A
couple of the testing sessions I've popped in with you guys, it was actually up on a screen.
Yeah.
We
had a big screen. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a big screen and Matt Nass was there, and then everybody gets to yell. And,
It's chaotic.
It was some fun too, yeah.
But it's fun. And so, our testing process is all online now, and I think much better. Honestly, the number one thing I tell people when they ask, how do I get better at Magic? I just say play Magic Online. Yeah. Like, this isn't like me trying to shill for Magic Online. It is how the pros prepare.
It is.
The vast majority of our limited and constructed testing was online.
Yeah. I mean, and honestly, that's been something that we've been talking about on LR since the Ryan days.
Yeah.
Like, because, the first booster draft I ever did was online. The first time I played
Magic. First booster draft I ever did was with Homelands.
Really?
Yep.
Oh, no. Wait, aren't those is there even enough cards in there?
No, it was just a mess.
Okay.
We didn't know what we were doing. We didn't even know what this thing was.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, so I learned by doing sealed deck. And then Ryan, I told him I want to get on Magic Online because he told me this is the best way to learn. And that was the first time I did it. I remember going to a local card shop after I had drafted online, 2 or 3 times. Next question comes from Jared, who says, hi, Marshall and Luis. With the meta undoubtedly forcing aggressive decks, is there anything a pro player or semi-pro should consider within their draft pod to counter this strategy? Or is the format solved enough to just follow the current wisdom? Does one lose percentage points by trying to think outside the box in a format like 3X Ixalan, also Elmer for life? Thank you, Jared.
I don't like the Elmer for life part, but the rest, sadly, this is not a format where I'm telling you, I'm going to be like, yeah, you can find your way around this, or because people are doing, zigging, you can zag. You have to zag.
We looked.
Or you zig. Like, you need to draft the 2 drops. Yeah. The best way to counter Fathom Fleet Firebrand is play Queen's Base Soldier. It's not to try to draft the Shorekeeper control deck.
Yeah. Funny thing happened on camera today. I don't know if you caught much of this, Luis, but Ken Yukihiro drafted an absurdly, I thought it was a horrendous deck. I mean, it was 4 color. He was splashing for Burning Sun's avatar. He was blue-green based. It was a complete mess. Of course, we put him on camera round 1 against Brad Nelson. He smashes Brad, who Brad has 2 bad draws from his mediocre deck or whatever. And everybody's like, we did it. And then, of course, he just promptly goes 1-2. Loses the rest of them. Also, one other note, by the way, from the PT today, this is short. There was an Ancient Brontodon on the battlefield today.
Against me.
You killed it immediately.
No, I Pious Interdictioned it. Not quite as good.
Yeah, because he did have
2 Drovers of the Mighty.
Yes.
But actually, a weird situation there where we're sideboarding, and he starts telling me about how he won his last round with Ancient Brontodon, and about how he scried it to the bottom. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, I already put in one Legion's Judgment. Should I put in a second one? He's like telling me about all these Brontodons in this deck.
You should.
I'm like,
he only had one.
I'm like, I'm just going to play the one, and if I need to, I'll side in another one.
That's
It did not come to that.
All right, let's see. This next question comes from Shannon, who says, "Hey, Marshall, I don't have any questions regarding the Pro Tour preps, so I'll pass." Okay, well, let's see. Well, let's just answer this question. It says, but I do have a question about a casual draft, dino-sized draft that WotC just made up this set. My shop's customers are living, I'm assuming that meant to be loving this draft since it's quite a lot more forgiving than normal draft. Any ideas? Doesn't have to go on the show because it's irrelevant, but it is on the show. Did you hear about this?
Yeah, this is 4-pack draft. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I haven't really thought.
No, it's dino-sized.
What does that mean?
4-packs.
Oh,
yeah,
it's 4-pack.
No,
draft.
it's dino-sized.
Right.
Yeah,
4-pack draft. I haven't really thought about the implications. I think this is a good set for that because
it is more forgiving
because there is a lack of playables. My guess is that it will reinforce the tribal synergies. Like Merfolk is really the place to be when you get an extra pack of One with the Winds and Jade Guardians and whatnot, and it would just make the decks all better. It actually makes dinos worse, I think.
Okay. Soren says, excited to see Luis back on the Pro Tour. I know a lot of people have that too, and I'm one of them.
Well, don't blink or you'll miss it. I'm already 5-3. I'm not really going anywhere.
He says, here's my question. Oh, Soren, I like this. What's the most wrong a teammate has been about the current format? Did you think anybody took a stance where you were like, wow, that just seems off?
I do heavily disagree with Ben's assessment of Skullduggery. Mm-hmm. I don't see why he rates it so low.
Okay, yeah, that did seem to be a point of contention.
Like, I think the card... I understand him wanting to fight against overselling the card because I think the card is actually a little overrated. You know, when you're talking about taking it over contract killing, it's like, okay, well, maybe, dial it back a notch. But it's still a 1-mana trick that not only is a 1-for-1 for 1 mana, which is great, it's sometimes a 2-for-1
It's sometimes a 2-for-1.
So yeah. I think Ben is wrong about Skullduggery.
Yeah. One of the things I like about it and about the other ones is that I have had multiple times in the format where I've been able to apply enough pressure where my opponent, they know. They're like, you probably have Vampire Zeal, but here's my double block because I can't just keep taking these hits.
In my feature match today, I left Vampire Zeal on top because I explored into it.
Yes.
And then my opponent, did not play that well around it.
He was like, no blocks, no
Yeah, he just kept taking it. So it's like, wow, it's like, this card's doing work. And I never cast it. Yeah. I don't think I ever cast the entire game.
I don't think you did either, no.
So, yeah.
So, I think those cards are that good. This next one's a little bit off topic as well, but I think a good question. This comes from our friend Pete, who says, wondering if you guys have approached sealed deck building any different due to tribes. Like after sorting colors into bombs and playable and junk, do you go through and look at how many vampires or merfolks you have to see if a tribal deck might be there if the piles don't make it obvious? And the answer is yes. Oh, yeah. Totally. I did a bunch of sealeds for our sealed deck episode, and that's the first place I looked.
So, yeah, it's less about number. You're not like, do I have 7 vampires or 10 vampires? It's more like, how many Anointed Deacons do I have?
Yep.
Do I have Pirate's Cutlass? How many Jade Guardians and One of the Winds do I have? And once you look at those payoffs, it's just like looking at for bomb uncommons or rares. It's like, oh, I've got a good payoff. I've got 2 Otapek Huntmasters and a Drover of the Mighty. Okay, let me scope how many Colossal Dreadmaws I have.
Exactly. And you see these. You start to see these patterns of these 1-2 punches.
You're going to be tribal.
There's not that many payoffs, like we talked about earlier, so they actually stand out pretty strongly. This next question comes from Kyle, who says, so when you're testing for the PT, do you spend more time testing strategies you expect to work or more time testing strategies you feel are more untested or off the wall to try to find something unexpected? That's interesting because, there's something to be said for really working.
Oh, yeah. This is actually a great question because it's both. What we try to do is first draft enough so we understand all the cards. Like, we understand the value of each individual card or like how they perform. So the first bunch of drafts you do, you're just trying to draft the best deck. But then you specifically try things like, I actually literally did a draft where I first picked Walk the Plank, second pick Stormfleet Aerialist, but then third pick Martin made me take a white card. He's like, look, try drafting white-blue. Like, just take this white card, and then we'll try drafting white-blue.
And you were on Magic Online?
Yeah, and we want to see how it goes. And we ended up blue-black anyway, but we did take 2 white cards, then white was not cut, or not open, and so we
But there was some science happening there.
Right. I did not take the card I would have taken in a normal draft, in the Pro Tour, or in a draft I was trying to win. We do specifically take things like, first pick, this dinosaur card and try to draft dinosaurs. Or, we haven't tried Black-Green Explorer. Take this Wildwood Walker and we'll try to draft Black-Green Explorer. Not correct draft strategy for that draft, but we wanted to see, how does this deck work? does this deck work?
Right. Because what ends up happening is that sometimes, like this black-green deck that you just mentioned, 1 in 25 drafts, it comes together.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, it's kind of not worth the payoff even in this case, but it might have been, right?
There are times like when it's worth drafting it, and it's...
I mean, that's what your opponent was playing.
Yeah, in the last turn. And I think his deck was actually good.
He had 3 Wild Growth Walkers in that deck, 1 Lurking Chupacabra, but he didn't play it. I thought that was a little strange. But.
That is a little weird. But in a bunch of 7 or 8 Explorer guys is what it looked like. He played 4 against me each game.
That's right.
So it is good to basically...
Well, and an Ancient Brontodon.
Well, yes. Think about it this way, is every time you learn one of these decks, it's like you have another like tool in your arsenal. Like, it's the reason we tried to force white blue. It's the reason we drafted white blue a few times. Is so in the Pro Tour, if white and blue are the colors that are open, you're equipped to draft it. Because let's say you're talking about an event where you don't have a ton of time to prepare. And you're like, okay, I'm going to learn how to draft these 3 decks, but I know I don't know how to draft red-blue pirates very well. So you just know that if that's the color that's open, you're probably not going to draft it. Because you don't really know exactly how it works. Because what you don't want to find yourself doing at a high-stakes event, an event you care about, is being in an archetype you haven't drafted and then looking at 2 commons and being like, I don't know which one's better for this deck.
I just don't know which one I'm supposed to.
Like, imagine you never drafted Merfolk, and you're like, am I supposed to take Shaper Apprentice or Tishana's Wayfinder? And you're just like,
Yeah.
And it's just like...
Totally. Or even worse, what if you're like, is it River Herald's Boon or Shaper Apprentice?
Yeah.
Right? And you're like, I don't know, this thing could get flying.
It's River Herald's
Where everybody's
Boon by a
like,
lot.
it's River Herald. You know, they'd be screaming at you. But if you hadn't done it, you'd think, well, this could have flying, and this is just a combat trick, you know.
So,
yeah,
so we do intentionally try strategies we think are probably not good, just to see how they tick, because again, like you said, 1 in 25 drafts, maybe you're supposed to draft black-green.
Okay. Next question actually comes from John Watts, and he basically asked the same question. So, John, I hope that our answer to the previous one answered your question. So we're going to skip ahead to Jonathan, who says, who's the rogue on the team? Who's the one that's arguing for the fringe strategies? He's also predicting, he says, and why is it Ben Stark? He says, truly love the show, gentlemen. Thank you. Who is it? You have a pretty big group, because it wasn't just Team Channel Fireball. You said you were with...
it was Team Ultra Pro as well, plus a couple of people who weren't on teams.
So who's the one coming in with the,
who's the most likely to draft a very strange deck?
Or maybe to advocate for some strategies that aren't, what the group agrees on?
That's a good question. See, it definitely used to be David Ochoa, but we actually didn't touch on this time, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. I would say that the person... You see, you think it might be me because I like to draft these decks, but
no,
it's very disappointing. Yeah, when the Pro Tour rolls around, I'm like, hey, look, a black-white vampires deck.
Yeah. Yes.
It's like, oh, weird.
Also, you drafted vampires at that other PT too, although they were red-black at the time.
Yes,
right?
that is true. Yeah. Shadows of Innistrad.
I remember that.
Honestly, I don't think with the current configuration we have, we're that likely to have someone go completely off the rails.
Yeah.
There have been people I've tested with where that's definitely the case, and they just draft completely differently, but I think in general we do enough. Again, it's a slow sort of consensus building, and we don't always come into perfect agreement, but we beat these things to death. If people have severe disagreements, then we try to figure out a way to resolve it. And it can't always be resolved, but if it can be, we at least get it to a point where both people understand what the other person's saying, even if they don't agree.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen that happen, by the way. It is fun to do that. All right, Adam says, where are the late-game value cards like Vance's Blasting Cannons or Treasure Map right now? They still feel like flexible, useful cards, but in packs 1 to 4, do you take a good 2-drop like Tillinolly's Knight or Stormfleet Aerialist over them? What about decent removal like a Fire Cannon Blast or a Vanquish the Weak?
Paulo had a great argument today, because we were talking about Vance's Blasting Cannons. Mm-hmm. And, this is the 4-mana card, exiles your top card, and you can cast it. So you don't get to play lands off it, if you just get to play spells. And he's like, if the game is going to last 4 or fewer turns after you cast Vance's Blasting Cannons, I would rather have Pirate's Prize, the 4-mana draw 2. Mm-hmm. And he's like, and Pirate's Prize isn't good. He's like, I think Vance's Blasting Cannon is worse than most good commons.
Okay.
And this is a card we had pegged as like a bomb, because it looks great. And most, Outpost Siege was a ridiculous bomb. Mm-hmm. I'm not quite there. I think I would take it like, reasonably high. But it is way worse than like a Bishop Soldier. It's way worse than a Tillinolly's Knight.
What about the other card he mentioned? Honestly, it's the front runner for my favorite card in the set, not to be confused with best card in the set, Treasure Map.
Yeah, Treasure Map is cool. It's not a card I take very highly either.
Yeah. It's just too slow, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is funny because a lot of games are lost to Flood, but you can't put... You can't put these slow cards in your deck.
I know. I do think that Treasure Map does have a slot in there where you can put one slot to it. It's cheap.
I would have...
It really
I might have played
flood.
it in my Vampires deck today because I had Contract Killing, Pious Interdiction, Vraska's Contempt, a bunch of Lifelinkers, Mark the Vampire. Like
my thinking on it is also that like I understand that like when we talk about these things, we say the format's aggressive and stuff that you know you have to be prepared for that. But I understand Limited that it doesn't always go the way you want it to.
No,
right?
yeah, people don't always curve out.
No. So the key for me is to make sure that I don't overdo it. So I'm not running Pirate's Prize and Treasure Map and Vance's Blasting Cannons and all these really slow cards that just end up being so that my whole deck is slow. But you know what? I can sneak one Treasure Map in, get a few scries, and feel like even if I'm trying to do the Vampires thing or whatever. But Blasted Cannons is way slower than that. That's 4 mana do nothing. That's 4 mana go. And they're just like, okay, you take 6. It's not good. Alex says, I root for Team ChannelFireball. What can I do to help them as they prepare for the Pro Tour?
I think if you were to tweet at ChannelFireball, like the Twitter account, letting them know that you're rooting for the team, like that really does help because part of the reason that ChannelFireball, the store, sponsors ChannelFireball, the team, is because we think people enjoy it. We think it's a cool thing to root for, and letting them know that you're following the team, and it's always good to hear.
Yeah. Also, we should have said this at the onset, but big congratulations, speaking of ChannelFireball, to both Josh Hutter-Layton and Martin Musa. They are now officially in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
and
it's awesome.
Have had associations with ChannelFireball of varying degrees over the years. And
they were both on the original team, ChannelFireball. It was really awesome watching the video of them getting in. And
that was fun. Yeah, Luis and I got to go to the Hall of Fame reception thing last night. By the way, thanks for that, Luis.
Yeah.
You got me in. But I love those. Those are a big perspective check for everything that we do to kind of step aside and to get to.
Josh gave an awesome speech, and I'm going to badly paraphrase it here because it really rang true. Is like, he doesn't play Magic for the accomplishments. He doesn't play Magic for the prizes. He doesn't play Magic because of the tangible rewards. He plays it because he likes to push himself and challenge himself. And this is the one time where he gets to take a step back and say, this is a marker of what I've accomplished. Yeah. This is an emblem of what I've done in Magic. I was like, wow, that's
Josh
really
is
good.
not like a particularly outspoken person in public, but that speech was A+. Martin's was too, by the way, just deeply personal. Anyway, I wanted to say congratulations to those two. It's also just sweet to see two really good dudes, get in. Let's see, Daniel Lee. Okay, so Daniel wanted to know about how it was different testing for this versus a normal event, but I think we covered that. Pyotr Berlowski says, hey, Marshall and Luis, many thanks for the show. It's always a learning experience. My question is, how close is the expected Pro Tour metagame to the online metagame? When you sit down to test, do you feel like the collective knowledge of the internets, with a Z, has explored the whole solution space and settled into the optimal choices?
It varies from Pro Tour to Pro Tour. This one, I would say that it's much closer to Magic Online. I don't expect huge differences. There will be some people or teams with different opinions, but you see very drastic shifts when you look at the normal sets where we're playing this tournament 2 weeks after. You're going to see people slamming Slitherblades or swashbucklings at Worlds, and you're like, wow, people aren't doing that online. And then people it propagates from there because people watch the coverage. They hear about, here's this, 6-0 drafter who first picked one at the wind over every common, and that sort of stuff gets out. But right now, I would say it is fairly similar.
Okay, a few more questions here. We've got 100 of them here, but I'm gonna get through a few more. This one's great. So Ben says, "Hey Marshall and Luis, how much nonsense is allowed in PT testing, especially the week of? Luis told the story of deciding to play cancel over Stoic Rebuttal, and it seemed like everyone was pretty high strung, other than Mr. Scott-Vargas. Are these sessions always intense?" Or does humor break up the tension more often than we've seen on the CFB Testing Insider videos? Also, which pros are most likely to engage in nonsense other than Luis, as well as those least likely other than Ben Stark, it says?
Well, see, here's the thing. Ben is not someone who likes to purposely engage in nonsense. He's also the easiest person to derail in the entire world.
He's so easy to get.
I'll give you a perfect anecdote. This is the reason we didn't do the show last night. We didn't have our deck locked down. We're sitting there. It's 10 p.m. Deckless are due at midnight. So we have the deck laid out. We're arguing over the last bunch of slots. And somehow someone gets Ben to start ranking team members of another team. Ben's sitting there trying to rank the team members
for no reason
of Team Ultra Pro for no gain, no reason. Because Ben's favorite thing is ranking people.
He loves ranking.
Like, he's already ranked everyone, and
oh, man.
we're just dumbfounded. Like, I'm dialed in at this point. I'm not, like, screwing around. And Ben's, like, trying to decide whether, like, Alex Hayne is better than Ivan Flock. And it's just like, oh, my God, Ben. In general...
But once you get him going, he's going to do it.
I tried to play a match against him on Magic Online, and I had to stop because he just would get derailed into 17 different conversations over and over again. In general, we have a reasonably generous nonsense to testing ratio where we are testing, we are on topic, we are there testing from about, 9 to 11 is when people start showing up, some at 9, some at 11. And we should call it quits around 10 or 11, like solid 12-hour day. Mm-hmm. Without, like, we often will order food to not have to, like, because mobilizing a big group, takes time. But there's people screwing around. There's people making jokes. There's people laughing about stuff. If it wasn't, we wouldn't do it.
It's an important part.
Well, both to relieve pressure and because, like, if it's not fun,
it's just fun, yeah,
then you're not going to do a good job.
Yeah.
But I would say in general, like, Ben is the highest producer of inadvertent nonsense. I'm the highest producer of intentional nonsense.
Yes, for sure.
And you have people like Raptor who just doesn't produce nonsense of any kind.
Right. He deflects nonsense on
like Paulo also no nonsense except like he just wants to go get ice cream every 2 hours. So.
Which, by the way, he did when we did coverage.
Yep.
Like
course.
Both days.
Yeah.
3 different flavors. Yeah. I have to say too that. If you want to divide the world into nonsense and not, this is one way to look at it. But, there's a lot of joking and inside jokes and fun being had while testing is happening too. Like you can have both at the same time.
We're also, like, this is a group of people, and at this point, like, some of have these relationships lasting 10 years, right? Mm-hmm. So we have so much shared history that we're not really as much learning new things about each other as, like, knowing how people are going to react to things, and like we have all these like old inside jokes and like old memories and stuff. So it's different where there's not much like team building. Like, when you get like, let's say you form a team of 6 people and only a couple of them knew each other. You'd spend a lot of this time like bonding as a team. We've already done that so long ago that we know we're so very relaxed and familiar with each other that we're able to get work done while still messing around in a way that's not disruptive.
Totally. And you don't have that professional cloud hanging over where you have to like carefully craft every sentence.
No, people aren't.
You can say, I think you're wrong. Here's why. Yeah. And you're not going to hurt somebody's feelings most of the time.
At this point, no one's getting offended when Ben yells at them because though Ben's blunt and rude and insensitive. And no, even though Ben is just very like factual
and direct,
it can be hurtful if you don't really know that's how Ben is.
But if you have him framed properly,
and that's a useful thing to know in general. Is like figuring out what perspective someone's coming from does color what the impact and context. of the
and that's where your experience helps.
Right.
You know each other. Let's see. Next one comes from Zhizhuang Yang, who says, how much theory crafting versus playtesting goes on when discussing and debating the topics for testing? How many matches or games would count as giving something a fair shot?
So what we strive to do is, when it comes to limited, is to draft enough that we understand enough that we can talk about these things without having to like provide concrete examples. Like at this point, we have so many drafts under our belt that we're not theory crafting anymore. This is all just based on actual experience and gameplay. Earlier in the formats, there's more theory crafting, and that's where having a team is really handy, where you're like, I've never played with this rare. How well does this do? At this point, I think we've all played with basically all the rares, or played against them. Mm-hmm. Like, there's just, I'm sure you have. Like,
I definitely have.
Like, there's nothing you haven't seen. Yeah. So there's no theory crafting there. We're like, we pretty much know how good, Entrancing Melody is. We pretty much know how good, like, Mavrin Fane is, right? And there's not a whole lot of theory crafting. It's the same in Constructed, actually, where at the end of the day, when we're deciding between Spell Pierce and Negate, or whether to play 2 duress or 4 duress, it's not because we're going to like, all right, let's play another set of 10 games. It's like, well, we all played enough. Let's just talk about why we want one versus the other.
Okay. Derek says, hey guys, simple question for y'all. Do you like this limited format?
No.
I'll go first. No. The thing is that I will qualify this, though. It is relative. So do I like this limited format relative to the other limited formats I've played? No. I think this is one of the bottom ones for me. I think it's doesn't come together very well. I think the draft part's not great. I think the games don't play out particularly interesting. relative to other things I could do with my time, it's still pretty high. It turns out the complexity and the uniqueness of booster draft still has my vision. It still keeps me thinking. It still is the thing I'd rather do than just sit and just watch some random TV show or space out. So, booster drafting is like one of my favorite things to do, just full stop. And this is still something I'm doing. But relative to the other sets, no, I don't like it.
Yeah, I largely agree, except I have found my time on Magic Online is spent not booster drafting at this point.
Yeah. And I mean, it's been out for a while.
It has.
We put in our drafts.
I'm not a volume player as much as I used to be, but when a format grabs me, I'll do a lot of it. Did a lot of Hour of Devastation drafts. After this Pro Tour, I will expect to trail off on Ixalan drafts. It's just, there are fun things about it. I still am excited to draft. I still did a bunch of drafts this week, not in preparation for the Pro Tour, sure, but it's not like I was unhappy doing them. But it's especially harsh coming off of Hour of Devastation, which was one of which is exactly pretty high up in my pantheon of drafts.
I think it might have cracked my top 5 at some point.
I think it's in 5 to 10.
Yeah, and you have more to choose from than I do. Christine says, "Hi, Marshall and Luis. Do you manage the data generated by your testing? Do you maintain spreadsheets with matchups for standard, on the play versus on the draw, archetypes and Ixalan draft? Do you collect enough to run regression analyses? Thanks."
Marshall, you.
Oh my God. I remember the first time I went to watch you guys test and you and I were walking to some restaurant after and I'm just like, that was not what I expected it to be. It's funny. I'm going to answer it for you. The answer is not really, though some of the teams do. It's not that spreadsheets and that kind of data aren't used, but the real truth of it is that getting reasonable sample size in the time frame that these players normally have is not possible. You can certainly extrapolate data from the information, but what the players actually do is they put a lot of weight on their experience and their intuition, having done this so many times, rather than needing to see, we did 70 red-white drafts, and here's all the data that we've combed through, and we've decided that this is the best deck in the format. They are really saying, look, nobody's going to have that much data about it for each archetype, for every little thing. So what they're doing is they're saying, I've done this before. I can look at the things and the patterns that I've seen before, and I can make reasonable assumptions, and these are all open to debate. You guys will throw these on the table in front of everybody, and Luis might come in and go, I've done 20 drafts, and I think red-white's where you should be. This is why. This common's great. You get open. You can get the deck even if somebody else is in it. And then somebody else might come in, and you guys can have a discussion about it. But, the truth of the matter is that you're just not getting full-on sample sizes of everything that you can do in that time frame anyway.
Yeah, well, part of what I've struggled with is it is really challenging to find meaningful data. And what I mean by that is, let's say, to use a constructed example, because that's where people, will really want to do this. And I've been on teams with people who have. It's like, let's find out what the Mon-Red against Teamer matchup looks like. And they'll play 10 games, they'll record a set, they'll play 10 more games, they'll record a set. But then 2 other people play, but the lists are different. And then they'll record those, and all that gets lumped together, and there is something there, but on the other hand, it's like, well, this one teamer deck had 3 Magma Sprays in the main deck, and it was like going 70-30 against Mono Red. The other teamer deck didn't, it was going 40-60, and you average them out, and it's like, what are you trying to measure?
Right.
And it also runs to a problem with sample size, because let's say you played 10 games, and you went 80-20. Well, it's not an 80-20 matchup.
No.
It's not. You went 8-2, but it's not an 80-20 matchup.
No.
I can guarantee you that. Modern Magic does not have 80-20 matchups for the most part.
Right. So you're going to have to extrapolate, right? You're going to say, I felt favored, but I ran hot or whatever.
The truth of the matter, too, is like, what if you have players of disparate skill levels
Absolutely. And every player that you play against is going to have a disparate spirit. I mean, you might get close, but...
Right. Or you look at like, okay, you're playing a lot of Magic Online, record all your matches. It's like, if you are winning a lot of Magic Online, that does not necessarily mean anything. If you're losing a lot, it does. But, we had a stretch where everyone was winning with everything on Magic Online or losing with a bunch of things. And it's like, what are you trying to measure? Like Sam Party was like, it doesn't matter what you do in the teamer deck, you're going to beat the mirror online most of the time. And it's true, because the mirror is
because you guys are all professional, full-time Magic players. Yeah.
And so it's like, that's just not valuable data. So I'm the first person to admit I think we could use a little bit more rigorous data analysis in our preparation. That said, I think that there's so many confounding factors that it is difficult to structure it so that you're getting really good actionable advice, because how is that going to tell you whether you want like the third vizier of the many faces in your deck? And when you look at limited win percentage, it's especially in a format like this, like, well, if you if you have like a hostage taker in your deck, your blue-black pirates deck is just so much better
you're
than if you
getting
don't.
an 8% bump off of one card or something stupid. Yeah,
that's not reflected in the like blue-black 3-0 column.
Nope, it's not. And in order to really make this data useful, you would have to comb through each one with detailed notes. For example, you'd want to note every time your opponent got mana screwed and you did. Now, these should average out over time, but over 10 they don't.
So what we do is we'll post like, played a league, here's my matchups, here's my win-loss, here's what happened in the matches, and get a feel for like, is a Braid good? Is Greenbelt Rampager, that was a card we tested, ultimately didn't play, is that card good? And then when it comes to limited, it's less like I went 3-0 with Merfolk or 2-1 with Merfolk. It's more like I think River Herald's Boon's the best common for Merfolk.
Yeah.
One of the one is actually the best. But whatever. And because in my matches, that is what the card's been performed the most. It's less about your individual win percentage and more about like what are you learning from this and why.
Okay. A few more questions here, and we're going to call it a show. I really appreciate all the awesome questions we got. Unfortunately, we can't get to all of them. Luis has to get back to bed so he can go play in the morning, and I have to wake up super early for coverage too, so we're not going to be able to get through all of them, but I do have a couple more.
But unfortunately, I have to think a lot while I play. So
yeah, right. Should I take out this Brontodon or not? Yes, I should.
No Brontodons.
And you did. What are the differences, if any, between testing for the Pro Tour and testing for any other tournament? This is kind of a trick question because the truth is, you guys don't test in the same way for other tournaments.
No, like let's say there's a Grand Prix that was standard. Mm-hmm. I would probably play a couple leagues with a deck I was liking and play that in the tournament. Mm-hmm. Completely different animal. Like, the Pro Tour is just 10 times as important as a Grand Prix, if not more. So I would say that the Pro Tour is where we really focus and buckle down and test. The Grand Prix, it's more like, hey, do you have a good teamer list? Okay, I'll play it. Or I think I want to play Mono Red this week, and you just kind of do it.
I think we already answered this next question about kind of the overall process where people are recording their own drafts and then reporting data back to a group. This one comes from Brian, who says, what are the biggest stresses and pressures going into any Pro Tour?
For me, personally, it's I would like to play well. Like,
okay. But I mean, you need a good deck. Yeah. You need to figure out the draft format. Like, aren't these like...
I'm never that stressed about the draft format.
Okay.
I feel like we always have a handle on it. Mm-hmm. Like, doesn't mean you're going to do well, but I feel like we always... Like, I almost can never remember having this experience in the last couple of years, like, of sitting down and being nervous in the draft of I don't know what to take. Right. I'm looking at two cards and I just don't know. I feel like I always know what to take. Mm-hmm. Not saying I always make the right decision. Not saying I always make the right choices.
No, but you guys are a limited focus team in some ways. You have some really good special. I mean, you do the show.
Half the people on our team are like known for limited prowess.
Totally.
So I feel very good about that. Constructed is the most stressful. Yes, that's a good. I was misinterpreting the question. Yes, basically like 5 p.m. On Thursday when decklists are due
which happened, by the way,
is like, oh my god, I don't know what I'm going to do. And like this PT was actually really hard because, again, we played Teamer with black, and it's like we don't even know if we should splash the black. If we do, we don't even know which card we should play, and it's just like we couldn't decide. It was so hard because all the expensive cards have just pluses and minuses. Mm-hmm. We're not going to play any more games. Mm-hmm. We just have to kind of make a decision. It's really hard to pull the trigger. Submitting the final list is really hard because you're like, this is it. You're committing to this. You're committing to 10 rounds if you make day 2 of this, more if you make top 8. And at some point, like I've had these tournaments where it's like, God, why did I put these 2 cards in my sideboard? I would love to have anything but these 2 cards, and it's just like, you don't get to change.
Is there any way that even after the rigorous team testing that you still feel underprepared, generally speaking, coming in?
We get the metagame wrong sometimes for the Pro Tour. Like, and that's the sort of thing where it's like some amount judgment call, some amount like, are you out leveling yourself? Are you at level 1, level 2, level 3? And some amount missing something. Like a small detail which we missed was Mono Red is now playing Invigorated Rampage, which is a 2 mana +4/+0 trample, or 2 creatures get +2/+0 trample. And it's just good technology. It's a way to make their Hazoret trample over Thopter tokens. I actually don't think it would have changed our deck building at all, but it is a important detail of a mono-red list, which is now commonly adopted, that we didn't know about.
I see. And it just slips through.
And that felt like, okay, Paulo's like, why didn't we know about this? And I'm like, yeah, that's a good question.
Okay. Last question. Kyle says, what do you think the biggest misconception about testing for the Pro Tour is?
I think that the biggest misconception, honestly, of people, when it comes to testing specifically, it's the one you ran into, which is you probably think it looks different than it does. Mm-hmm. Like, it looks way closer to a bunch of dudes hanging around a kitchen table playing Magic than a bunch of people in a spreadsheet, with a Minority Report, like moving the numbers around, like the numbers flashing in front of your eyes. It's way more, but that's the trick. It's like, yes, it looks a lot less focused and disorganized, but it's not coincidence that the same people always win.
Yeah, the information flows in a way that you wouldn't expect, but it flows. It really does. Honestly, like these discussions,
to give
these
you
side
a
talks.
perfect example, I think this is one very vivid, is when you watched us test for Worlds, and you came in and we're discussing what modern cards to play in our modern Abzan deck, and we're just like naming cards to you, I think seemingly at random, like Damnation, Deathmark, Slaughter Pact. We're just throwing these cards out that we haven't played any games with, and you're like, you're just pulling cards at random. It's like, no, but we've played so much Modern. Every single one of us has played thousands of hours of Modern. We know what these cards do, and we're just deciding between them.
Yeah. And you know the context. People know why you're bringing up the card. Right. You don't need to explain. Well, Deathmark also kills. It's like you just all know all that stuff.
Right. And the Dark Blast and whatever. Like it looks a lot looser than it actually is. But it is also, in some ways, kind of loose.
Yes, I think that's a good way to describe it.
It's kind of a weird thing.
Like I said, I mean, to me, it's more organic than I thought it would be.
Right.
I thought it would be more on computer screens, more in meetings, more in, hey, let's hear what Martin Yuza has to say about this. It's much more talking and
I'm never going to say it couldn't be tightened up. Because it could be.
And some of the teams do. Yeah. Some of the teams have like, hey, we have a 9 a.m. meeting.
Yeah.
Bring your laptop for notes. You know?
But
I have a PowerPoint.
To some degree, I know that like our team coasts a little bit on the fact that we have a lot of people who are just very good technical players.
Yeah.
But I also think that like we have done this together so many times that there's a reason we continue doing it, and we don't think there's big flaws. Like we don't feel like we're underprepared generally.
Yeah, and the other thing that I did gain an appreciation for was the fact that you guys, at the end of the day, even if sometimes it doesn't look like it, you really enjoy it and each other's company. And I think that if it was 9 a.m. PowerPoint presentation from Luis, that would go down. It's just like, I don't want to do that. Like, we're all doing these type of careers because we didn't want to do that. So adding a little too much of that might make it not worth it anyway. So great stuff, Luis. Thanks for the insight on Pro Tour testing, and thank you so much to our patrons who asked these awesome questions. You guys are fantastic, and we really appreciate it that we can ask you these things and just get such great insightful stuff on a whim from our listeners. It is one of the really cool things about honestly about the Patreon page. It's just really great. I never had this before. I never had the ability to just reach out, to our most dedicated listeners and ask some questions. Before, it would be like maybe I could throw something up on Twitter, and then I'm just getting bombarded, and it just felt like overwhelming.
No, I think crowdsourcing is really good, especially from a subset of people who very clearly are invested in the show.
Yeah, they really care. So thank you for that. Okay, that is going to do it for the show this week. I want to remind you, our sponsor is ChannelFireball.com. Hey, if you're a fan of the website, make sure you check out the team. I mean, we've got Team Channel Fireball out here at the Pro Tour. They've got their jerseys on. They've got their nicknames on the back, and most of my favorite players are on the team, not coincidentally, but the people that I root for. Of course, I've been rooting for Luis for years on the Pro Tour, and it's been really fun to see you back on there. Ben Stark, of course, he's one of my favorite players, and really a bunch of really good people as well on Channel Fireball, which I think is just underrated. That like I can feel really good about rooting for you, not just as skilled Magic players, but also as people. I think that's really cool. Check that out. You can watch the Pro Tour and keep up with how they do. This is the first one of the season, and it's going to be going forward. And of course, anything you need Magic related, you're going to find at ChannelFireball.com. They're going to stand by their product. They get it out to you very quickly. I've been getting some tweets from people that said, "Wow, like this shipping happened really quickly," and they were really happy about that. So great. I think that's awesome. And of course, it makes me happy to be supported by Channel Fireball. If you want to find us on social media, I'm Marshall_LR. Luis is LSV. Easy to find us. Anything related to the podcast, and I'm talking anything Luis or I related, you're going to find a link to it on the front page of lrcast.com. And you can also find an archive with every episode of the podcast ever. going back to 2009. So if you want to listen to our thoughts on Innistrad, for example, they did flashback drafts. I had a couple people ask, and they said, "Do you have anything on Innistrad?" I said, "You can listen to the set review if you want." I mean, it's a little dated now, but and certainly we know more about the format now. But that stuff all still up there, lrcast.com. Thank you so much for hanging out. We'll see you next time.
So this feels like an appropriate time to talk about some of the less productive things that happened during testing.
Okay, so we're back to the nonsense question.
And of course, it all involves Ben. I feel like we talk about Ben so much on the show, but that's just because Ben is one of the most unique human beings I've ever met.
He is, and yeah, we both like him.
So at one point, I was locked out of my hotel room. I was just sharing it with Pat Cox, and he was gone.
Mm-hmm.
He hadn't gotten back or from wherever he was, and my key didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And Ben's like, whatever, just go to the front desk and just ask for a key and just say you're in the room. They usually don't call the police. And I'm like, what? And he's like, no, just try to get into the room.
What?
He's like, look, worst comes first, they say no. They don't always ask for ID. And sometimes they
Oh my, I'm so uncomfortable right now. I can't do this stuff ever.
And he's like, look, remember when we went to Japan? Like, I wasn't even on your room, and I got there early, and I just got into the room. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know how that happened, but yes, that did happen.
That shouldn't have happened.
Like me, him, and Brian Kibler actually were sharing a room, and he got there like 4 hours before us, and then we get there, and Ben's just in the room, and I'm like, your name's not on the room. Like, I didn't even like tell them anything about you. How did you get in there? He's like, oh, I just told them I was in your room, and I guess because he was in Japan.
They're
like,
let it fly?
well, there's two foreigners. I guess he's probably not telling. Like,
he does this to me too.
Yeah.
He when we're in Vegas, we're staying down there for the World Series. There's a line that you can go to, and then there's a line that only very special people can go to. And he'll be like, that other line's kind of long. Let's just go in this one. And I'm like, dude, we don't have that card. It's stupid. Like, I don't want to go. Yeah. It'll be. He's like, they never check. It's fine. He'll pull up to the valet and just flash like this expired card, and they're like, yeah, whatever. I'm just like, I don't have
unethical life hacks with Ben Starr.
Yeah, it's like angle shooting.
So
unethical life hacks.
So the way I actually ended up getting to my hotel was actually like pretty funny.
Okay.
I called the front desk.
Okay.
It's like, hey, I'm staying, because I knew my room number. Mm-hmm. Hey, I'm staying. I would like to add a name to this room. And they're like, okay, who'd you like to add? I'm like, Luis Scott-Vargas. They're like, okay, cool, your name's on the room. Or like, his name is on the room. They thought I was obviously Pat, the person who booked the room. I waited like 5 minutes so they wouldn't recognize the voice, went up and just asked for a room key. And they're like, can I see your ID? They're like, okay, yeah, your name's on the room. Here's a room key. So if you ever want to...
Oh my God.
So I just called, added my name to the room, and then walked up and got a key.
Ben is a bad influence on you.
Oh, man. The moral of the story here, if moral is the right word.
The immoral of the story?
Act like you belong.
Act like you've been there before.
And, oh, man, you'll get away with so much. So don't use this poorly. Like I said, don't abuse this privilege. But, oh, man, the world can be your oyster.